Hello, welcome to another episode of Highlights from the Hill. I'm your co-host, Jim Cousins, who, along with our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Carol Cavanaugh, bring you interesting people and stories and inside information about what's going on in the Hopkinton Public School systems. Today, I'm really excited to have our Director of Technology, Dr. Ashok Ghosh, with us today. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Jim. It's great to be here again.
That's so fantastic.
And Ashok, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jim. I'm excited to be here with you.
All right, great. I've known you for a long time, although I can't
Correct.
believe it's already been like 11 years or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I started in the district 14 years ago
Yeah,
and served as the assistant principal for 3 years and then took over as the tech director just
Right.
about 11 years ago.
Now, did you come to the school system as a vice principal, or were you another role?
I started in education as a teacher. So I was previously a high school biology teacher.
Okay.
So taught in Springfield, Mass. Before ending here as the assistant principal. And before Springfield, I was out in Ohio as a teacher in the Cleveland area.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Ohio?
I did not. I grew up in Vermont. So,
Oh.
yeah, I grew up in southern Vermont in Bennington. So I spent most of my time there, went to college in Maine, and then worked my way out west
Yeah.
after college. And because of my wife's schooling, she ended us in Ohio for 4 years for her
Oh.
training. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing. All over the place.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit about leaving the classroom and going into an administrative role, first assistant principal and then central office. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really enjoyed teaching. I mean, I actually missed teaching
Yes.
quite a bit. And so in my role in Springfield, I primarily started to do a lot of curriculum work. So I was almost towards my end of my tenure there doing, 50% curriculum director. So I did that part-time and then was teaching. So started to get into leadership roles, became the department head of the science department there. We were developing an IB program, a K-12 IB program, which is the International Baccalaureate Program, which does a lot of, thematic units, and it's a standard-based curriculum that's implemented. So I was in charge of implementing that, the 6 through 12 component.
Sure.
And so that got me really excited about curriculum and some of the leadership work, working with teachers, training teachers. And through that process, I felt like the assistant principal was kind of the next best thing for me.
Yeah. Well, I feel like when you have one of those jobs where you're working in curriculum and with children at the same time, that's kind of nirvana.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to do both of those things.
It is a nice role because then we could work with teachers, kind of talk about some of the changes we wanted to make with the curriculum we were working on, and then actually as a teacher kind of get your hands dirty and see how it's working, and then kind of go back to that curricular cycle where you're meeting with your colleagues, talking about what worked, what didn't work, how can we change it, how can we make it better. And so that was kind of an exciting time.
And what was it like coming to Hopkinton?
It was a great change. I mean, I think for us, we were looking for being closer to the Boston area for our family to find a place to settle. We had 2 young children at that point, so we were also shopping for a school system and a place where my wife could find work as well in the Metro West area. So getting to Hopkinton, I think, was exciting. It was a nice community. People seemed nice. There was houses with yards and places to garden and do all those things. So it seemed like a good fit. But I actually worked in Hopkinton for my first year as assistant principal before we decided to move here. So
Okay.
I think after seeing just the output of the high school kids and just their professionalism, being in the assistant principal role, I thought it would be a good place to move our family. So after 1 year of working here, we moved into Hopkinton and became residents.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, it's kind of very convincing that you were someone who really knew the product and believed in it so well that you moved your own family here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, so it ended up being relevant. I think, Hopkinton served our kids. I've got 2 kids in the system. So one's graduated, Maya's in college now, and Avi's a junior. So
Nice.
yeah, they seem to be liking the experience so far, which is good.
Yeah.
So what I'm interested in, if we can cast way back when you first took over the role of Director of Technology, what was it like in Hopkinton. I always talk about, when I was a kid, I'd give my eye teeth for the opportunities that kids today have for film and video. I was in slide projectors and that kind of stuff when I was in high school. So what was it like? What was the technology environment, if you would describe it?
I think as I started as assistant principal, I think the amount of equipment was very limited, right? I think so. Even from, let's say, the 3 administrators in the main office had some desktop PCs, and a few teachers were experimenting with laptops in a pilot program. So not even every teacher had a laptop. So there was really no centralized equipment in any building. So the high school, because it was a newer building, had a lab. So there was a lab for the graphics, and there were some devices in the library for doing research and circulation type work. So, but beyond that, there was no really centralized Wi-Fi at all. So internet was, if we had it in our office, it was wired and plugged into our desktop computers. But none of the classrooms really had any wireless internet whatsoever. Because the high school was newer, they did have like classroom phones, but a lot of the other buildings had no centralized phone systems in any of the classrooms. They were still relying on the PA systems, the push-to-talk systems in each of the classrooms. Attendance was taken with Scantrons, right? The teacher would fill out the bubbles, and we'd have student runners that would run the Scantrons down to the main office, and they'd scan those to get attendance.
Wow.
So that a lot of that.
Wait, this was 10 years ago?
That was really, probably 13 years ago. But yeah, it was a while before we went to the digital attendance.
Yeah.
Was that surprising to you?
That we were still doing it when I arrived?
Yeah.
No, because it was the standard, I think, for
that's
most
what I was
part.
wondering.
When I left Springfield, we were doing the same thing. It was probably,
Sure.
in most systems, K-12 at the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was efficient, but it was just a lot of moving pieces and a lot of extra paper. And so it didn't seem like, the ideal thing. So I think those were the big things. Was really just access, right? The internet was available, but access for educators in buildings on a regular basis was a little bit limited, right? And you definitely weren't mobile. You were really tied to whatever workstations were available. So communications were much different. Not as many phone systems, computers weren't available, and the Wi-Fi. So those were some of the big things that you would notice when you first came here.
Yeah. I find so interesting that was just 13 years ago. And now I remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, you were talking about this system where when you come in as a visitor, you scan your driver's license or something like that, and you get a sticker with your face on it, as a visitor. So just the level of, I want to say, ease, it's behind the scenes stuff that's going on, but it's very easy to operate, and it's interconnected.
Yeah. I think at that time too, the town wanted to make some investments right in the infrastructure. So I think the town, embarked on a journey to really work with the schools and all the town buildings to create the town closed fiber loop, right? So main fiber at that point, all the buildings really weren't connected via any common network. So the town and schools kind of worked together to create that fiber network loop through all the buildings, which helped tie a lot of our structures together. That was kind of the backbone of where we really began building off of that. And from that created some central server locations at the high school where we were sharing some of that space with the town. So that was really where we started to internalize and start to build up some of those wired and wireless networks from that process. And that structure still exists, And as we add buildings or build buildings looking towards Charleswood, part of that is expanding that fiber network to that new building. So
right.
It's still there and still really the backbone for us. So that was, that was kind of the vision that I think the town had to kind of create that infrastructure to build on, and I think that was one of the driving factors. And really beyond that, there was probably 7+ years of, I would say security upgrades too, right? So over a series of capital projects, the other goal was to really improve the safety and security of the buildings, right? Talk about change from when I first arrived. most people were using master keys, and they still exist for exterior doors. There was no, access control, right? Where you're able to fob into a building. That structure didn't exist. Visitor management systems didn't exist. Cameras throughout the buildings were non-existent. So I think working with the town and some security contractors, we kind of put together a 7-year plan and kind of put that into place, which has helped.
Let me just say that fobs on the door was one of the best things ever.
Oh yeah, they're so convenient.
I
They
know.
really are.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you have also been responsible for all of the instructional technology.
Correct.
I mean, that's a whole other realm of what you do that I'm not sure sort of people on the outside get to see. We see the fobs, but we don't necessarily see the work that you're doing to, put instructional things in teachers' hands in classrooms.
Yeah, I think that was really a big part of once that kind of structural backbone was put into place,
Sure.
right? That the next thing was really looking at getting the internet in everyone's hand, or at least getting a device in students' hands to be able to do instructional, lessons in the classroom. So we were able, over a series of years, right, to get devices, laptops, and Chromebooks, iPads in the hands of students in classrooms, which then started to allow us to build upon that digital curriculum, right? We were still using textbooks at the time, for example. We still have textbooks. It's still, still a component of our curriculum, but being able to access a digital book if you wanted to was now feasible, and some students prefer that, and some students may prefer a paper copy, right? So giving some of the students a choice in really how they access or learn that material, I think, was a big pivot as we kind of started this process. We worked with a number of tech integration, teachers and coaches, because I think at that time, learning in a one-to-one environment was really new to many educators, right? So there was a lot of growing pains with just understanding, classroom management now that you have a classroom of students all able to get on at the same time. Like, what does that look like? How do you manage that? How does that change our handbooks? There was lots of revisions to handbooks to update and keep up with those changes. So there was a lot of professional development done to kind of prepare teachers to use those tools, to use them safely, and to then be kind of targeted with their instruction. So I think that change started probably, I would say, right around 10 years ago, where we had access to digital tools. And at that time, we decided to kind of standardize with the Google Suite for education. Before I started, we were primarily using Exchange Server that was in some closet in the, in the MDF of the high school, right? So we kind of moved that to the cloud and went with Google Services just to improve some of the security and the access for employees with communication and Gmail, which led to some of their other free tools like Google Docs and Sheets. And so a lot of that was just training teachers on those basic productivity tools, so they had some comfort, so they could create PowerPoints or slides for their instructional lessons, or learning how to use spreadsheets in a math environment to help kids. And so we started with some of those basic tools, and making sure everyone had an LC projector, which we didn't really talk about. Most people were using the Vis-a-Vis markers still when I landed, right? And so we moved away from those to digital projection, document cameras in the classrooms, and a laptop. So those three components, which we kind of call the holy grail of a classroom, we kind of standardize. Every classroom has those three components, or really four. You've got Wi-Fi, a document camera, a laptop, and a digital projector. Really allows teachers to kind of use those digital tools, which they didn't really have beforehand. So.
And you know how many classrooms we have in the district, and so to be able to do that in every classroom clearly had a budget impact, and kudos to the town for making that commitment. I mean, I'm sure it happened incrementally, but it's really nice.
Yeah.
Which probably takes us to the door of the pandemic.
Yes.
When,
true.
We were, I think, better poised than many other places because we already had one-to-one, and we had teachers who knew how to use a lot of tech tools on our way into the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously an adjustment for everybody, but I think
Of course.
the big step up we had was the infrastructure was in place. You know, to Dr. Kavanaugh's point, the devices were in place. I think we had like one last pool of devices that we were refreshing that year and had already been on order, and that was almost like the last available stock of Chromebooks that like Acer had. Like after that, no district could really like get Chromebooks, and they were out 6+ months before they could deliver. And I think Acer, because we had been a customer for a number of years, paid and flew those devices out here before, you know, it really had an impact on us. So all of our students really had access to a device when the pandemic hit. you
Right.
know. And we were able to get MiFi units, you know, for example, for families that didn't have wireless, you know, access or internet at home.
Yeah.
We were able to hand out those units and get those devices to those students to help them, you know, with those lessons. So I think that was a big component of it, but also having the teachers have some comfort with those tech tools, right, was also important. I mean, there was still the challenge of learning to use Zoom and other products like that. I mean, teachers had used, you know, Google Meets a little bit here and there and had some idea, but to learn how to teach kindergarten class on a Zoom lesson, you know, is quite a challenge. And kudos to the teachers that were, you know, in that position to do that, and the patience that they had to be able to support kindergarten students. I remember just sitting with some of those teachers when those lessons were live, and just the patience of our teachers at that time to be able to answer all those little questions on all different screens throughout the town
Yeah.
was pretty insane, to say the least. So, but they were able to do it, you know. And so I think that positioned Hopkinton, you know, to kind of do the best we could in the conditions that we were facing at the time. And just being able to have access to even screens and TVs, where when we did start to come back in that hybrid model, right, as we transitioned from fully remote to that hybrid model, having some ability to, you know, instruct and have that instructional lesson delivered to students that weren't able yet to make it into the building safely was key to keeping that learning going through those tough times.
So I want to follow up on one thing that you kind of mentioned. Like, as we were talking about the hardware, the laptops and the Chromebooks, you mentioned the software with, you know, like Google for education and stuff like that. What as the technology director is your role in targeting or implementing or deciding which software type of stuff, and who do you talk with about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we typically try to look at, you know, our strategic plan. A lot of it stems with, you know, there's obviously productivity and, like, you know, basic workflow software that we kind of renew on an annual basis, right? We're talking Google Suite, security platforms that we need just to keep our kids safe, web filtering, all those things that we're required to have.
Yeah.
You know, those are reviewed by, you know, central office and principals as need be. But then from an instructional standpoint, I build kind of a budget in a collaborative way with principals and other directors, and then central office staff to say, okay, you know, what are your needs for the year? You know, what is missing, let's say, in a classroom where you might need a new tool, and kind of through that process, we identify tools that are needed to kind of meet those, you know, strategic goals. And or if there's a new initiative in a building, you know, what tools are needed to do that, and how can we kind of, you know, finance those tools. At the same time, we look proactively at every tool and look at usage, right? And Dr. Kavanaugh and I will sit with, you know, Susan Rothermick, and we'll kind of determine, are these tools relevant anymore, right? And there are times where we have to make tough decisions to say we need to roll back on some of these tools because they're really not being utilized in the way that makes sense anymore. And that can often free up money to invest in other products that we may need to meet the new initiatives that are coming out in a given year. So it is a pretty collaborative experience where we're working with principals to say, what are your needs, hearing from teachers and department heads on what is going to help you in your classroom, and then kind of making some decisions about what needs to be purchased.
Yeah, and sometimes teachers will talk to us about that from the instructional side, and then sometimes from the student learning data side. So if we see that there's, a need in terms of student learning, we might be buying individual licenses for kids who need just a little bit more. So a lot goes into the planning
Yes.
around instructional technology. I think people might just think that it's an easy process, but it's not. It involves a lot of data and a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just speaking of data, right? It's there's been a lot of work in the last probably 6 years, and probably right around since COVID, almost, of doing data privacy work with all of our vendors, right? So making sure any kind of tool that we're using is vetted, and we have a data privacy contract in place with those vendors. And so we've worked with the Tech Collaborative over the last probably 6 years to create a process where vendors are able to come to the Tech Collaborative and create a contract if they want to get involved, and then Tech is able to kind of push those contracts out to the various school systems, and we can sign off on them. So there's a nice process in place where that's actually, forcing vendors to keep up with the current laws, and also us pushing back on the vendors to make sure they're holding up their end of the bargain with those contracts as we, look for new tools. So that is part of the process. So if you're an educator and you're interested in trying this, let's say, new AI product, right? You still have to go through that data privacy vetting process where we take a look at it, your department head looks at it. If it's something that meets our curriculum need, we'll apply for the data privacy contract and get that set up. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes to kind of managing, when you look at it, probably 4,000 different educational tools
Right.
within the district.
And I can't underscore enough your involvement in that process. I mean, you have been invested and involved in that process with the Tech Collaborative since its onset.
Yeah.
So you've been a key player there.
Yeah, it's been
Really?
it's been a great experience. I think to see, right, that collaborative side of things, of like working with community organizations with a bunch of tech directors in the Metro West area to say this is a problem that we're all facing, and Tech being willing to say let's tackle that as a topic for our meetings, right? And that one item became like a very big business for Tech,
Yes.
where they're now servicing like all of New England, New York,
yeah.
other schools, and they can't even take on enough of the clients. And a lot of that came from a few core Metro West schools that started that
I see.
process. So yeah.
So you've both mentioned Tech Collaborative. So could you just define what that is?
Well, Tech Collaborative, I guess. I'm thinking of it's a collaborative of local public school systems, K through 12. It focuses, I would say, in one region of the Metro West area.
Okay.
Where member schools pay a membership fee to be a part of that collaborative, and they have a lot of professional development that they offer their members. They'll offer job alikes. So even as an assistant principal, for example, all assistant principals would have a monthly meeting where you would show up, talk about common problems, talk about solutions, and so it was a great place to meet with colleagues and troubleshoot issues that you were having. So
I see.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really built on the idea that we can do more collaboratively than we can individually.
Yep.
And so sometimes we belong to a couple of collaboratives. So sometimes you get, special education services, professional development services, transportation services, and it's really a nice way to kind of pool your money.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said when you were talking about you have to review things and sometimes you have to switch things. What was the change you made that got the most howling from from the users?
Well, I think I would probably say, for learning management systems, right? Like we have a learning management system. We've tried a number over the years, from the free versions of Moodle back in the day when that's all that was available. And then we were on a product called Canvas, right? So Canvas is a really popular national level learning management system, and we had that for a number of years, but it was only at the high school, and a lot of the other teachers in the elementary schools were using more of Google Classroom. So we made the decision, I made the decision before, right around the time of COVID, to move to Schoology. So Schoology is another learning management system. It integrated better with our PowerSchool student information system. it was universal across all, grade levels,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to be easier to support. So I would say teachers in the moment were not happy with that because there were so many other changes going on
Yeah.
at the time. But in order to really support kids, we thought, and in a remote environment, we made the decision to move to Schoology at that point. So
Yeah, I think
wasn't
we
very
were
popular.
hearing from parents too that some teachers would say, check your email, that's where your assignment is, or check Canvas, that's where your assignment is, or, there were just so many different mediums for kids to get information that I think they were getting confused. Look at Seesaw, look at this, look at that, and then finally when we went to Schoology, it was one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that, I think was in a line. I hate to say it. It was pushed ahead because of COVID, but in terms of our strategy as a technology department, we are trying to consolidate more, right? So there's this idea of best in breed, right? You want to try to pick the best, products that are available that fit your needs, which we still do a little bit of, but we're also trying to consolidate and have things that integrate, with PowerSchool as our SIS, because it just makes a number of things much easier, right? It's less data to migrate and move between systems, right? It's easier to do data analytics in that way. It's easier to roster and move and set up classrooms. And so there were other components that led into that, right? So with Schoology being part of PowerSchool now, there's the ability to sync grades back and forth between the two products, whereas if you have a variety of different products, that isn't always possible.
Yeah.
Or easy to do. So with that vision, we're trying to get to safer systems, less logins, right? More single sign-on approach.
Yeah.
And data in kind of one or two silos instead of all over.
All right, so listen, we're going to go over a little bit because I want to get to this last thing.
Okay.
All right. So briefly, Ashok, look back. Like, what are some of the projects, either big or small, that you are really pleased with, or proud of how they came out, or felt that they were really good for the work that we do here at the schools?
Yeah, I mean, I would start back. I could say as an assistant principal, which is not in the tech world, but it's still active today. I was kind of the main promoter and starter of the F1 visa program in the district. So
Okay.
I'm kind of proud of that.
Yeah.
That started back when I was first year assistant principal here. Mary Colombo was the assistant superintendent at the time, had done the paperwork and gotten us kind of filed with the government to run that program. But then she kind of handed me a binder and said, "Here you go. Your first job is you're going to be in charge of this program." And so that program is brought in anywhere from probably 6 to almost 15 students a year, depending on our enrollment and what we have space for, into the high school. So we have international kids from all over that come, and it's exciting to see kids from different countries. It kind of makes the classroom a little more diverse. It provides an opportunity for kids to meet other kids from different countries, and it also has helped us with the tuition from that program has helped fund our world language programs and teachers in the district to bring on Mandarin, which was a goal at the time, right? We wanted to bring on Mandarin at the middle school and even into the high school. So a lot of that came from that program. So I'm happy and proud of that program. I think to add to that technology-wise, I think it's really just, I think for me, getting devices in the hands of students and giving access to all students to kind of pull out that equity piece, right? We don't have to worry about whether a kid had a device at home or had access to the internet at home. We've now provided a device for every kid that needs it.
Yeah.
No matter what their background is. So I think that's a big thing in education. Am I like, oh yes, I have to have a digital everything? No, I know I get picked on for that right? I'm the guy that says get rid of the paper all the time, and people always bust on me for printing too much paper. But I think our big goal has always been a balance, right? Like, so if you look at our technology, mission statement and kind of vision statement, it really talks about balancing technology with other methods of learning in Hopkinton. It's not, I have never wanted kids just to sit in front of screens and that be the end all. That was never my goal, and I hope the town and the district really understands that. We put a lot in the teachers' hands to say what is the best method for what you're trying to teach. Sometimes it may be digital, sometimes it may be coloring, or whatever the teacher decides. So I think having it available and having it functional is great, and we've worked towards that, but making sure teachers know that they have a choice of what tools they use.
Yeah, no, I think your equity of access work has been amazing.
Yeah.
It truly has. It's been remarkable.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's, well, a little bit at the end of our time, a little bit over time, but thank you for all of that time.
Thanks for having me, Jim. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been great.
Yeah.
Always nice to see you, Carol.
Nice to see you too, Jim. And Ashok, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Yeah, it's been
Appreciate it.
All right, I look forward to seeing you next time. And I look forward to seeing you next time here on Highlights from the Hill. Have a great day.